So today I had my blood drawn for my annual panel. People that don't know what an annual panel is, it's, basically the every year, sometimes for some people it's twice a year, every 6 months, they get their blood drawn to see their metabolic panel, which is like their lipids and their sugar and their A1C and things like that, and to see how much at risk they are of developing things like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, things of that nature. And it got me to muse. The last time I had one of these, my triglycerides were higher because I was following a starch-centered diet that was low in protein. Since then, I went back on basically kind of more like a vegan Atkins diet, though not quite as low in carbohydrate. It's more like Atkins towards the end of Atkins, where you're adding more whole grains and things like that. So I get about between 1 gram to 1.5 grams of carbohydrate per pound of body weight, and I get about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. I'm careful with the fats. I don't get very much fat. Fat makes up between 15 and 20%, maximum 30% of my diet. Or maximum 33% of my diet, I should say. I was balancing the macros for a while, 33, 33, 33, because it does help with fat loss. However, what I want to point out is this goes back to Dr. Walter Longo and his idea of low protein. And the thing is, I understand where he's coming from in a laboratory standpoint. However, if you look at people like Dr. Jeffrey Life, who is a internationally famous doctor that reversed his aging process, reversed his basically what would you call it, the epigenetic process of aging. He has reversed phenotypical aging in his body. He is much younger than he was in his 50s now that he's in his 80s. And he did this in his, I believe it was his 50s or 60s. He reversed the aging process through hormonal replacement, a high-protein diet, things like that. And he wrote a book called Life Plan. To be honest with the book Life Plan, to me, did not contain any information I didn't already know. But for most people, it contains a lot of information that they need to know. Okay, about how to get healthier, especially when they're older, when they're middle-aged or older. And the thing that I want to point out is if you look at Dr. Walter Longo and Dr. Jeffrey Life, who do you think ultimately is going to reach a greater maximum lifespan? Not who's going to die first, because I'm pretty sure Dr. Life, who's already an octogenarian, is probably going to die prior to Walter Longo as far as time goes. But who do you think is going to reach a greater chronological age? I'm almost guaranteeing you it will be Dr. Jeffrey Life, not Dr. Walter Longo. And this is because, as I've noted, now Dr. Jeff Life in his book Life Plan points out the importance of a vegan diet in the reversal of the hardening of the arteries and the reversal of heart disease. The thing is, you need protein, though. You need a high-protein diet to control certain metabolic factors. And that's what's important. And you need fats, too. You just don't need as much fats as people tend to use. And that's what's important to understand. But this got me to muse. I am going to get into those theories on aging, both the triage theory and the antioxidant theory. But the triage theory is very important, and I think one of the most overlooked things is proteins and amino acids. And in fact, like glycine, I've done a number of videos on glycine. Glycine itself is a geroprotector. Glycine itself extends rat lifespan, probably extends human lifespan. But the fact of the matter is, and keep in mind, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a healthcare practitioner, not a dietitian, nothing like that. But the thing with protein restriction is really the only protein that you're supposed to be limiting, it seems, is methionine. And it seems that taking glycine helps to limit methionine, as does sticking to a vegan diet. The other thing that's interesting to note is that plant protein consumption, the consumption of plant proteins, extends lifespan. So the issues with a high protein diet, which most likely are geared more towards saturated fats, cholesterols, diseases in the meats such as Salmonella, E. coli, things like cancer in the meat, stuff like that, bovine leukemia, stuff like that. That gets removed when you eat high plant protein. And that's the thing, is I don't think that limiting total protein is the way to go. I know this from firsthand experience. Like, this is the thing that I want to point out. Limiting of total calories, like the nutrient sensing pathways seem to be the ticket to longer life. That's what it does seem. Okay, for me, limiting total calorie intake, no problem. I had no problems with that. Limiting fat intake, no problem with that. Okay, limiting carbohydrate intake, no problem with that. My body reacted normally to all these things. I had no crazy side effects. So I can limit total calories, I can limit fat, I can limit carbohydrate. I was fine every time I tried one of those macronutrient strategies. Lowering protein, lowering total protein, I blew up like a pig. My triglycerides went out of whack. My good cholesterol and bad cholesterol got out of whack. Okay, not out of whack in the sense my good cholesterol was still higher than my bad cholesterol, but not high enough. My total cholesterol was very low, but my good cholesterol was not high enough. And that's the thing that's important to remember. And on top of that, my what was mild tachycardia for many years became severe. And I gained a lot of body fat, and I developed severe asthmatic symptoms. And this was over the course of 3 years when I lowered my total protein, okay? And the good thing, like I've said in a previous video, thank God I kept supplementing with micronutrients, which is something that, like, Dr. McDougall does not recommend except for B12, and he's iffy on that. But the thing is, I'm glad I kept supplementing with the micronutrients, because that, I think, is what kept me from literally dying. I mean, my body was out of whack from limiting my protein for 3 years. My health is slowly turning around, which I'll find out with my metabolic panel, my annual panel, when I see where that goes. But I'm sure I'm a lot healthier now, which I know just from my exercise tolerance. I can actually exercise now. Whereas while I was on that starch diet, when I stopped exercising and my weight went out of control and I got very fat, my exercise tolerance was non-existent. I mean, it was to the point where I couldn't walk 15 feet without losing my breath. I couldn't walk up steps. I was having issues with my heart rate. The heart rate and the asthma went together. So I was in bad shape. And my point is, I'm not saying this is entirely from lowering the protein content of my diet, but I'm pretty sure going from a high protein diet from a limited protein diet had a lot to do with it. Now, I'm going to leave links in the description about who Dr. Life is and who Dr. Walter Longo is. And I'm going to leave links to the plant protein and how it extends life expectancy. And I'm going to leave links to glycine and how it extends life expectancy through mimicking methionine restriction and things like that. I'm going to leave links to these things in the description, and I want people to follow them and read these things. But keep in mind, I'm not a healthcare practitioner. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a dietitian. I'm not anything fancy. And, you know, just do your own research. But keep in mind, I mean, this is, I'm just warning people, you know, this is the problem with jumping to the newest research without considering the fact that sometimes what we know works, works best. And that's the problem I had. As a personal trainer, as somebody that went to school to be a personal trainer, I already knew what worked. And believe it or not, what I think is the truth, as Dr. Life has shown, eating for performance, for the most part, with some minor tweaks, such as going vegan, eating for performance is eating for longevity. And that's what I think is the truth. I really do. I think that we already knew a lot of this stuff, and a lot of people are not implementing these things. It's kind of like when people say the USDA diet is a terrible diet. It's a horrible diet, the USDA diet. They're not actually following the USDA diet. The USDA diet is not a terrible diet. I do think it's carb heavy, but even that, as long as you're getting a lot of whole grains and not refined grains. See, that's the problem with the USDA diet, is it doesn't tell you to only eat whole grains. It doesn't tell you to only seek things like monounsaturated fats and healthy polyunsaturated fats like the ALA from the canola oil and the flaxseed oil and things like that. It doesn't tell you to only seek certain fats and only seek certain carbohydrates and to eat more beans and to limit meat. Well, it does. I think it does tell you to limit meat at this point, but it doesn't tell you to substitute that with more protein from beans and nuts and seeds and things like that, and to seek healthier fats. It's very limited in its instruction. And it does tell you to go easy on sweets and liberated oils, but it's not telling you, in the same sense, it's not warning you enough that sugar-sweetened cereal, regardless of whether if it's whole grain or not, sugar-sweetened cereal should not make up a healthy breakfast. Fruit Loops is not a healthy breakfast. Pop-Tarts is not a healthy breakfast. Whole grain sugar-sweetened Captain Crunch or whatever the hell it is, not a healthy breakfast. Just because it's whole grain does not negate the sugar on it. And that's the thing that people don't understand. And I think that, I think that's the biggest fallacy, is when people will say things like, well, this diet doesn't work and that diet doesn't work. And most diets do actually work if you follow the diet. The USDA diet is a healthful diet. I don't think that the USDA diet is a great diet for weight loss because of how carb heavy it is. But I do think it's a relatively healthful diet as long as you're sticking to whole grains and whole foods and limiting your use of refined foods and eliminating refined carbohydrates, flat out eliminating refined carbohydrates and limiting meats and limiting saturated fats and these things, and focusing on monounsaturated fats. You don't need a lot. You should still eat fats in moderation, very little fat, but the fat that you should be eating is monounsaturated fat primarily, and then some healthy PUFAs, healthy polyunsaturated fatty acids. But you want to avoid saturated fat in the form of coconut oil, butter, cheese, things of that nature. That's the stuff you want to be avoiding, and you want to be eating more like pumpkin seeds and nuts and things of that nature. And you want to be also eating fewer liberated oils, but if you are eating liberated oils, you want them to be things like canola oil and olive oil, and not things like soybean oil and corn oil and things like that. But the problem is that the information is too limited. But if they really did, if you can look up the research at PubMed, and that's what a lot of people don't do. They do not take the initiative to find out how diet affects their health, or how diet affects premature aging, or how, and that's what I'm going to get into with the triage theory, is how less inadequate supplies of these nutrients cause premature aging. And you know what, I'm going to leave a link to that in the description. And that's all for this video.